to the NFL. Another guy that also signed a massive extension with his respective team, Jamal Adams with the Seattle Seahawks. The Seattle Seahawks extended Jamal Adams 4 years, $70 million to make him the NFL's highest paid safety. It comes with a nice little $20 million signing bonus, $38 million fully guaranteed. And this is a guy that's been in contract disputes and in negotiations for 5 months now. And with it, he becomes the NFL's 17th highest paid defensive player. Actually, the 17th highest paid player, period, in the NFL. But this is what I wanted to focus on with Jamal Adams. Happy for him that he got his money. Whenever we think specifically about the NFL, oftentimes negotiations come down to 3 specific things. Comes down to your talent. Are you innately talented? Comes down to your production. How are you producing? Are you producing? What kind of production are you giving us? What's the value you're giving us? And 3, and this is most important, it comes down to timing. Are you the next guy that's lined up to get paid? That's what it comes down to. Those are the 3 main things. So if you take a look at all 3 of those things, talent, production, and timing, all of that worked in Jamal Adams' favor right now. When you look at talent, there's no question, absolutely no-brainer. Seattle Seahawks had to pay him. He's absolutely one of the best NFL safeties. And he's just 25 years old, so he's still in the prime of his career. He's just getting off his rookie contract. This is a guy who is big. He's physical. He's maybe the best safety at getting to the quarterback in the NFL. His ability to put pressure and sack quarterbacks from the safety position as a defensive back is extremely, extremely impressive. He might be the best at doing that in the NFL. So talent, check. Production, absolutely, he's produced. This is a guy who is an all-pro, Pro Bowler in 2019. In fact, he's been a Pro Bowler for 3 straight seasons. If you want to say, well, his production was a little bit down last year on total tackles, and could he be better on coverage? Absolutely. That's an area that he can work on. But even with that being said, this is still a guy who led the Seattle Seahawks in sacks with 9.5 sacks. Mind you, those 9.5 sacks not only were a career high, but it was a single season record for defensive back in NFL history, what he did from that position. So he led the team in sacks with 9.5 as a DB. He led the team in tackles for loss with 14. And he led the team in quarterback pressures with 30 as a defensive back. Mind you also that those 30 QB pressures were 14 better than the next closest defensive back in the NFL. So talent, check. Now production, check. Third and most important is timing. Who's the next guy? Who's the next guy to get paid? And Jamal Adams, fortunately for him, was the next guy in line to get paid. We see this all the time. That's simply what it comes down to. We see this all the time with the quarterbacks. How first it was Carson Wentz who cracked into the $30 million a year conversation. Then it was Jared Goff, or then it was actually Aaron Rodgers. Then it was Jared Goff. Then it was Russell Wilson. Then it was Deshaun Watson. Then we're seeing Dak Prescott in the 40s, Patrick Mahomes at $45 million. We just saw Josh Allen sign a huge contract extension. Lamar Jackson is working on one. I'm sure that it could eclipse Josh Allen's production, given that he actually won a league MVP. So the reason why the timing is so important is because it's not always about whether you are the best player at your position at said time. Because I don't think that anyone would say that Carson Wentz or Jared Goff were necessarily the best quarterbacks in the NFL at the time that they got paid. But that's the going rate. And they keep raising the bar higher and higher each time someone gets paid. That sets the new market value. That's the new market for a quarterback. So no one condemns the organization for doling out money because it's what they have to do to retain these guys, and they want to stay if they want to stay a little bit relevant. So I'm not saying that Jamal Adams is definitively the best safety in the NFL. I'm not saying that at all. Because certainly you can make an argument for him, but you can also make an argument for some other guys. Justin Simmons with the Broncos, Harrison Smith with the Vikings, Minkah Fitzpatrick with the Steelers, Derwin James with the Chargers. There are plenty of other guys that you might think are better players, but the reality is Jamal Adams just happened to be the next guy up. We just saw that Justin Simmons signed a contract this offseason that had made him the highest paid safety in the league, and Jamal Adams happened to be behind him. So he got more money. And now I'm sure the next guy that's going to get paid will eclipse that money, or at least eclipse the amount of fully guaranteed money. But there's also a fourth new factor that leads to a guy like Jamal Adams becoming the NFL's highest paid safety. And it's something that isn't discussed. I talked about the three: the talent, the production, and the timing, but there's a fourth one as well. And that is the importance to your star quarterback. We're living in a new age of stars in sports, and the player empowerment in the NFL, especially amongst the quarterbacks, is just beginning to burgeon. It's just beginning to grow. We're seeing the type of clout that these star quarterbacks have, their ability to wield power and, to be honest, and to insert themselves into more of the personnel decisions, to voice their opinions. They're feeling a lot more comfortable being able to voice their opinions and voice their input more frequently for any decision making, whether it's head coach, defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, this special teams guy, doesn't matter. They like inserting their opinion. So they've got a lot more say, a lot more clout, a lot more influence than they did. This is a new era that we're living in. And so quarterbacks are no longer just audibling and throwing footballs. We saw that case in point with Aaron Rodgers. He said enough is enough with the Packers. They've disrespected me. They haven't allowed me to be a part of personnel decisions. Well, that's going to change. And the Packers acquiesced, and due to Aaron Rodgers' request, essentially, they were able to re-sign Randall Cobb. They brought him back onto the roster. So Russell Wilson is a star quarterback. For several years, he had been kind of bottled up. He didn't voice any of his frustrations. He didn't publicly kind of say any disparaging remarks about the Seahawks organization. This was the first summer where he kind of put his foot in the ground and said, enough's enough. And he started voicing his frustrations about wanting to be a part of the personnel decision-making, to insert his opinion. And so a lot of this has to do with, hey, the organization wants to appease and coddle and cater to their star quarterback. They want to make them a little bit happier. And so Jamal Adams was a guy who Russell Wilson identified early on, saying, I want to bring this guy back. He publicly vouched for him to return. He publicly vouched for the organization, for the Seahawks, to bring him back. So a lot of this has to simply do with just trying to make Russell Wilson a little bit happier and cater a little bit more to him. Not to mention, you gave up 2 first-round picks, a third-rounder, a guy in Bradley McDougall, and a 4th-round pick to acquire him. So if you weren't going to sign him long-term, then that would have been all for naught. That would have been a complete waste and a complete failure of assets, of managing your assets. And it's really the first and only big time re-signing under the Pete Carroll and John Schneider era is signing Jamal Adams. So he obviously buttresses your defense. There aren't so many guys. You got Carlos Dunlap. There aren't so many guys that you have on the defensive side of the ball to replicate that Legion of Boom. You needed Jamal Adams in there to fortify that back line. And so again, I'm glad that they didn't, because otherwise it would have been an utter waste. Really would have, in my opinion.